What's going on, everyone? So I get a lot of questions about injury prevention, how resistance bands compare to free weights, and why are resistance bands so good for injury prevention. So there's a couple different aspects to it. So we're going to address each of those. Now right here I've got a good old-fashioned dumbbell. So let's pretend that we're doing overhead shoulder press, single arm overhead shoulder press. Now there's a couple parts to this movement besides the press itself, and the first thing is getting the dumbbell in place. So now if you're using a really heavy dumbbell, let's say you're a big guy and you're using 75, 80, 85 pound dumbbells, you're putting it on your knee and you're hoisting up here into position like this. So that right there, that's risk number one. It's not necessarily the press right here, it's the setup and then it's the takedown. And this is a lot of times are where people get injured, or even taking the dumbbell and racking it on the rack. So with our resistance bands, we don't have that same issue. Think about it, to get into position here, even if I'm using the heaviest resistance band or if I'm even using a combination of them, all I have to do to get in position is squat down a little bit, get it right into position, and stand right up. Same thing, when I'm done, instead of like trying to do this right there where I could hurt myself, all I have to do is do the opposite. Squat back down, take the pressure off, and that way I'm not putting myself in those vulnerable positions. So it's one, eliminating the scenarios where we're likely to get hurt. So that's the first thing. Now the other part of injury prevention is balancing out the strength of the smaller stabilizer muscles versus these bigger, more powerful movers like our deltoids and our triceps. And what I mean by that is when we're doing regular free weights or machines, we're working those bigger, more powerful muscles, but we're really not working those smaller stabilizer muscles, which we call our rotator cuff. And that's because as I press that weight up, I'm really pressing only in one direction. I only have resistance in that vertical plane. Whereas with resistance bands, I come into that same movement, and as I press up, I've got that band trying to pull me backwards, it's trying to pull me forward, side to side, and that's why when people aren't used to resistance bands, they come in here and their hands start shaking like this. It's because they're not used to that and they don't have good stability there in their shoulder. So if you want to build bulletproof shoulders, resistance bands are great for that because you're making all of those smaller muscles fire. They're isometrically firing to stabilize your shoulder. And a lot of these movements too come in if I do maybe a chest press, standing chest press, or if I'm doing any kind of rowing movement, I'm having to really stabilize because I don't have a bench to support myself. Think about it, even in shoulder press, you got a nice tall bench, you can lean back into that bench and that's helping stabilize. So any kind of standing movement with the resistance bands, we don't have that kind of help from the bench. So it's forcing all those smaller muscles, like I said, to isometrically fire and stabilize, and therefore they get stronger and you don't have that same kind of disparity between the smaller muscles and the bigger muscles. So that's probably one of the biggest things right there, is making sure that you're really strengthening those muscles. We all know that we should go in and do some of these rotator cuff exercises, but very few of us do it. It's kind of like stretching. We all know we should do it, but most of us don't want to do it. But when training with the resistance bands, you're getting that in the mix. So those are two of the biggest reasons why I feel that you have less injury with resistance bands over free weights. And it has nothing to do with the resistance level. A lot of people think it's because resistance bands are easier or it's less resistance than free weights, and that's not true, because if you use heavy enough resistance on bands, you have just as much resistance as you do with free weights. So it's not about that. It's about those other aspects. So that is your quick tip. I don't know if that's quite a tip. It's more like information. That's your information tip of the week. I'll see you guys next time.